my mic on, I guess. I guess that might be a pretty good idea. Looks like everything's fine. Cool. So, today I figured I would get into a bit of Native American mythology, and if there's enough time, if I want to keep going, I do have some other books ready to get into. But I figured I'd start at where the beginning of this really is for me, or was rather, which is in a piece that I titled First Contact, when in reality it's just a journal entry about a lucid dream I had on April the 28th, 2012. So we'll just start right there. I figure maybe people will trickle in as we go on. This is probably the least important part, so it's a good place to start. It's just really how I personally got into the subject. In the beginning, there was nothing save a gray old man and myself. A few minutes passed, and the memory of some transaction of the old man remains, if only psychic or assumed. His watchful eye remained over me at all times. We existed in a dark void, with nothing to be observed existing outside of ourselves. After this came the realization that I was dreaming, and an epiphany overtook me. I can create. I focused on this epiphany, and nearly instantly, indecipherable objects of varying colors came into existence, redefining the void that the old man and I had come to inhabit. This infuriated the old man. I could feel this, along with what may only be described as hope, the appreciation of life itself. My focus remained upon my creations, to the extent that I entirely missed the old man's transformation, and yet I was aware of it. My field of vision was not so limited to the restrictions of human eyes. It was similar to looking down upon something, as if from a great height, but while being completely level. But this was not quite my vision per se, but an empathy that became of perception itself. As my creations began to thrive, my attention quickly turned to what had been the old man. It was too late to observe completely the sinister being as it began to assault my face with a clawed and scaled hand of a dark shade of green. This being elicited an overwhelming feeling of dread, all the while this happened. I could feel myself growing weaker, and the dread intensify, as the cosmic horror continues its assault on my face. From it, I could feel fury, unlike I've ever personally experienced, and as I began to lose myself to it, I could feel a mourning feeling from all the creations that I reciprocated. This is where I wake myself up, as I do when any dream enters the realm of nightmares. I awoke to see that the eternity that dream had felt was mere minutes in this world. An absolute dread and confusion overtook me. The only other time I had felt this emotion was after a night terror. I laid there wondering just what had happened. Are dreams a susceptible state of mind that may be influenced? Never once have I ever wondered this in my life. Any attempt by someone on the subject of the meaning of dreams had been met with mockery, but I could not shake the feeling that I had made contact with some sort of cosmic horror, and that we were now aware of each other. I have had lucid experiences before, and never was there something that I could not manipulate. Yet the sinister being remained out of my control. I question its true form, considering of my perception of it from the embodiment of wisdom to that of fury, terror, and dread. So that's a good 7 years ago. Hey everybody, how you doing? Gas the Dreams, Lucid Wars now. Guess you know what's going on. Guess you know how we're going to go with this, but it's going to seem a little random until we get to this. This I came across. I have a PDF of a transcript of Bill Cooper's Mystery Babylon series that I was going through at one point, and I basically cut together the most condensed version I could of 3 episodes involving America, which were based upon a book called America's Assignment with Destiny. It was written by Manly P. Hall. This is directly from that transcript. It's not too hard to find. I can help you locate it if you really need a copy. The Popol Vuh consists of a mythology gradually mingling in its descent from the beginnings of history. The early part deals almost entirely with superhuman beings, and the latter part with the heroic deeds of authentic personages. It opens with a description of the creation. All was calm and silent, and the face of the earth was not yet to be seen. In the eternal darkness, and Quietude was the creator, the lord and maker, and Gukumats, the plumed serpent. They were surrounded with green and azure, and they were those who engendered. Then the Word came and spake with them, and they joined their councils. Those who engender then said, Let it be done. Let the waters retire and cease to obstruct to the end that it be sown, and that the light of day shine in the heavens and upon the earth. For we shall receive neither glory nor honor from all that we have created and formed until human beings exist, endowed with sentience. Thus the Creator said, Earth, and it immediately was formed. It was pretty reminiscent of the dream, to me at least, when I first read it. I was actually pretty shocked. It was difficult to deal with, and it's only been recently that I got to reading the Popol Vuh, but that's what I have here. I'm gonna go through what I thought to be some of the more interesting parts in it. Let's see, where do I want to start with this one? Such was the scattering of the human work, the human design. The people were ground down, overthrown. The mouths and faces of all of them were destroyed and crushed, and it used to be said that the monkeys in the forest today are a sign of this. They were left as a sign because wood alone was used for their flesh by the builder and sculptor. So this is why monkeys look like people. They are a sign of a previous human work, human design, mere mannequins, mere wood carvings. Even so, it is said that his light provided a sign for the people who were flooded. He was like a person of genius in his being. I am great. My place is now higher than that of the human work, the human design. I am their sun, and I am their light, and I am also their months. It's the first quote. Now, we're going to get into what they call, I guess, the lords over everything is the way that it's sort of presented here. But in study, people tend to refer to them as gods of death, the Xibalbans. These are the lords over everything, each lord with a commission and a domain assigned by 1 and 7 death. There are the lords named Scab Stripper and Blood Gatherer, and this is their commission, to draw blood from people. Next are the lordships of the demon of pus and the demon of jaundice, and this is their domain, to make people swell up, to make pus come out of their legs, to make their faces yellow, to cause jaundice, as it is called. And such is the domain of demon of pus and demon of jaundice. Next are the lords Bone Scepter and Skull Scepter, the staff-bearers of Xibalba. Their staffs are just bones, and this is their staff-bearing, to reduce people to bones, right down to the bones and skulls, until they die from emaciation and edema. This is the commission of the ones named Bone Scepter and Skull Scepter. Next are the lords named Demon of Filth and Demon of Woe. This is their commission, just to give people sudden fright whenever they have filth or grime in the doorway of the house, the patio of the house. Then they're struck. They're just punctured till they crawl on the ground, then die. And this is the domain of Demon of Filth and Demon of Woe, as they are called. Next are the lords named Wing and Packstrap. This is their domain, that people should die in the road, just sudden death, as it is called. Blood comes to the mouth, then there is death from vomiting blood. So to each of them his burden, the load on his shoulders, just to strike people on their neck and chest. Then there is death in the road, and then they just go causing suffering, whether one is coming or going. And this is the domain of Wing and Packstrap. Now, the Xibalban demons aren't really like many other figures. What's wrong with the mic? Is there... It looks alright to me, I can't really tell. Where did I went with this? So in Xibalba, there are 5 or 6 houses. There are 70, I'm not sure. There's the Dark House, which is the first one. It's basically a house that's filled with complete darkness. Beyond that is the second one, Rattling House, heavy with cold inside. Okay, cool. I thought it'd be fine. It looked alright. Because normally when it's not giving me feedback when nothing is being coming through it at all, it's normally a pretty good sign to me. Beyond the Rattling House is basically an extremely cold house. And the whole idea of it being rattling is the rattling of hail that's always following that. Beyond that is the third house, the Jaguar House. It's filled with jaguars alone inside. And they're basically always, probably hungry, I would imagine. Beyond that is Bat House. Bat House is one of the more interesting ones because they have this own really interesting mythological creature called the Snatch Bat, which are basically just like man-sized bats with knives for noses. I don't know why they have knives for noses. It's just part of the, I guess, the charm of the Popol Vuh. And beyond that is Razor House, which is filled with blades alone that move of their own will, if you will. Some people argue that there's a sixth house based on burning. I think it's later brought up in the text, but right here, and it only goes to the first 5. It takes a little while till one of the characters actually gets through it, because in the original story there is someone that goes and tries to pass the tests of Xibalba and fails, and it takes their, they have this twin figures that end up being the ones who conquer Xibalba and the Xibalbans. But it gets much more interesting as it goes. And I think So they were prayed to by the flautists and singers among the ancient people, and the writers and carvers prayed to them. In ancient times they turned into animals. They became monkeys, because they just magnified themselves. They abused their younger brothers. Just as they wished them to be slaves, so they themselves were brought low. One monkey and one artisan were lost then. They became animals, and this is now their place forever. That was like the cardinal sin for the Quiche people or the Mayans, was to magnify yourself or to make yourself appear, I guess, greater than you really are. They have the big thing that their characters that end up defeating the Xibalbans win through is self-transformation and wonder. So it's kind of interesting to me. You can see a sort of hatred of fakes, a hatred of that which is false. They went down to Xibalba, quickly going down the face of the cliff, and they crossed through the change of many canyons. They passed right through the birds, the ones called throng birds, and then they crossed Puss River and Blood River, intended as traps by Xibalba. They did not step in, but simply crossed over on their blowguns, and then they went on over to the crossroads. But they knew about the roads of Xibalba: Black Road, White Road, Red Road, Green Road. And that's the way you always got to Xibalba. You had to cross 2 rivers. There was a cave that was associated with it for their entire history, which I found to be a pretty interesting thought. It sounds like, if anything, some sort of interdimensional travel. It sounds like more or less that's what's going on, and that's what's being dealt with, as beings that exist perhaps in another mode of reality than one we normally perceive or think about, or at least most of us. And perhaps there's some sort of strange arrangement by going through extremely specific steps to reach that, to reach a means of bridging the gap, if you will. I truly don't know. It's interesting stuff regardless, though. "Take pity on me," he said when he realized. All their vassals took the road to the great canyon. In one single mass they filled up the deep abyss. So they piled up there and gathered together, countless ants, tumbling down into the canyon, as if they were being herded there. And when they arrived, they all bent low in surrender. They arrived meek and tearful. Such was the defeat of the rulers of Xibalba. The boys accomplished it only through wonders, only through self-transformation. And we are here to clear the road of the torments and troubles of our fathers, and so we have suffered all the troubles you caused us, and so we are putting an end to all of you. We're going to kill you. No one can save you now, they were told. And then all the Zabalbans got down on the ground and cried out, "Take pity on us, Hanapa and Zablanc. It is true that we wronged your fathers, the ones you named. Those two are buried at the place of ball-game sacrifice," they replied. "Very well. Now this is our word. We shall name it for you. All you listen, you Zabalbans. Because of this, your day and your descendants will not be great. Moreover, the gifts you receive will no longer be great, but reduced to scabrous nodules of sap. There will be no cleanly blotted blood for you, just griddles, just gourds, just brittle things broken to pieces. Further, you will only feed on creatures of the meadows and clearings. None of those who are born in the light, begotten in the light, will be yours. Only the worthless will yield themselves up before you. These will be the guilty, the violent, the wretched, the afflicted. Wherever the blame is clear, that is where you will come in, rather than just making sudden attacks on people in general. And you will hear petitions overheaded up sap, and the Zabalbans were told. Such was the beginning of their disappearance and the denial of their worship. Their ancient day was not a great one. These ancient people only wanted conflict. Their ancient names are not really divine, but fearful is the ancient evil of their faces. They are makers of enemies, users of owls. They are inciters to wrong and violence. They are masters of hidden intentions as well. They are black and white, masters of stupidity, masters of perplexity. What I find... Okay, I'll turn it up a little bit here. I just gotta figure out which one it is. Is that any better? I try not to get it too loud. I don't want it to be peaking. Looks like it's going into yellow at most. That should be alright, I hope. But what's interesting about that, I found, is that in this, the messengers of Xibalba were always owls. And what makes that interesting will come out only if you know about it. And if not, I'm going to explain it as best I can. Just how often owls have been associated with gray aliens, as people would sort of have their memory manipulated in what would be considered a sort of screen memory, I think is the term normally used. Like a memory that you would have in place of what actually happened that would distort what happened in such a way that you wouldn't really be able to access it or ever really tell anybody about it. So they find an animal that could closely resemble them in a way, and so people will think they're seeing owls, but what's really there is supposedly a gray alien. And there's been a lot of stories involving that I've heard. A lot of people have researched it, and I found it extremely interesting that it was owls that were the messengers of the Xibalbans. I don't know really what the Xibalbans were. They do seem to be pretty interesting in what they are and in their depiction here. Let's see, is this the part I want? Yeah, we'll start here. It's a lot. This is gonna take, it's gonna be a lot quicker than I thought, so I'm just gonna read this as well. And here is the beginning of the conception of humans, and of the search for the ingredients of the human body. So they spoke, the bearer, begetter, the maker, modelers, named sovereign plumed serpent. The dawn has approached, preparations have been made, and morning has come for the provider, nurturer, born in the light, begotten in the light. Morning has come for humankind, for the people of the face of the earth, they said. It all came together as they went on thinking in the darkness, in the night, as they searched and they sifted, they thought and they wondered. And here their thoughts came out in clear light. They sought and discovered what was needed for human flesh. It was only a short while before the sun, moon, and stars were to appear above the makers and modelers. Split place, bitter water place is the name. The yellow corn, white corn came from there. And these are the names of the animals who brought the food: fox, coyote, parrot, crow. They were 4 animals who brought the news of the ears of yellow corn and white corn. They were coming from over there at Split place. They showed the way to the split. And this was when they found the staple foods, and these were the ingredients for the flesh of the human work, the human design. And the water was for the blood, it became human blood, and corn was also used by the bearer begetter. And so they were happy over the provision of the good mountain, filled with sweet things, thick with yellow corn, white corn, and thick with pataxte and cow, countless zapates, anonas, jacotes, nances, matasanos, sweets, the rich foods filling up the citadel named Split Place, Bitter Water Place. All the edible fruits were there, small staple foods, great staples, small plants, great plants. The way was shown by the animals. And these are the names of our first mother fathers. They were simply made and modeled, it is said. They had no mother and no father. We have named the men by themselves. No woman gave birth to them, nor were they begotten by the builder, sculptor, bearer, begetter. By sacrifice alone, by genius alone they were made. They were modeled by the maker, modeler, bearer, begetter, sovereign plumed serpent. And when they came to fruition, they came out human. They talked and they made words. They looked and they listened. They walked, they worked. They were good people, handsome, with looks of the male kind. Thoughts came into existence and they gazed. Their vision came all at once. Perfectly they saw. Perfectly they knew everything under the sky. Whenever they looked. The moment they turned around and looked around in the sky, on the earth, everything was seen without any obstruction. They didn't have to walk around before they could see what was under the sky. They just stayed where they were. As they looked, their knowledge became intense. Their sight passed through trees, through rocks, through lakes, through seas, through mountains, through plains. Jaguar Keats, Jaguar Knight, Not Right Now, and Dark Jaguar were truly gifted people. And that's one thing is going to be great about this if you're new to it, is just some of the names that they have and use. Pretty great stuff. Hey, what's going on, Infowars? How you doing? Truly now. Double thanks, triple thanks, that we've been formed, we've been given, our mouths, our faces, we speak, we listen, we wonder, we move. Our knowledge is good, we've understood what is far and what is near, and we've seen what is great and small, under the sky, on the earth. Thanks to you we've been formed, we've come to be made and modeled, our grandmother, our grandfather. It was said that these were enough to keep them mindful of what was in the shadow and what was dawning. All they did was ask. They had reverent words. They were reverent. They were givers of praise, givers of respect, lifting their faces to the sky when they made their requests for their daughters and sons. Wait, thou maker, thou modeler, look at us, listen to us. Don't let us fall, don't leave us aside. Thou God in the sky, on the earth, heart of sky, heart of earth, gave us our sign, our word. As long as there is day, as long as there is light, when it comes to the sowing, the dawning, will it be a greening road, a greening path? Give us a steady light, a level place, a good light, a good place, a good life and beginning. Give us all of this, thou hurricane, newborn thunderbolt, sudden thunderbolt, newborn Nanahuac, sudden Nanahuac, falcon, Hunapa, sovereign plumed serpent, bearer, begetter, Zipakak, man, some of these are hard to say, Zumakane, grandmother of day, grandmother of light, when it comes to the sowing, the dawning. There, too, they looked toward the east, watching closely for the sun carrier, the great star at the birth of the sun, of the heat. For what is under the sky, on the earth, the guide for the human work, the human design. We're still waiting for the dawning, they said, these great knowers, great thinkers, penitents, praisers, as they were called. And there was no tree stone in the keeping of our first mother fathers, and they were weary at heart there, waiting for the sun. Already there were many of them, all the tribes including the Mexican people, all penitents and sacrificers. Let's just go. We'll look and see whether there is something to keep as our sign. We'll find out what we should burn in front of it. The way we are right now, we have nothing to keep as our own, said Jaguar Keats, Jaguar Knight, Not Right Now, and Dark Jaguar. They got the word of the citadel. They went there. And this is the name of the mountain where they went. Jaguar Keats, Jaguar Knight, Not Right Now, Dark Jaguar, and the Tams and the Locks, Tulan, Zuyaya, Seven Canes, Seven Canyons is the name of the citadel. Those who were to receive the gods arrived there. And they arrived there at Tulan. All of them, countless people, arrived, walking in crowds, and their gods were given out in order, the first being those of Jaguar Keats, Jaguar Knight, Not Right Now, and Dark Jaguar. They were happy. "We have found what we were looking for," they said, and this one was the first to come out. Tohill is the name of the god, loaded in the backpack borne by Jaguar Keats, and the others came in turn. Alix is the name of the god that Jaguar Knight carried. Hakuts in turn is the name of the god received by Not Right Now. Middle of the Plain is the name of the god received by Dark Jaguar. And there were still other Quiche people, since the Tams also received theirs, but it was the same Tohill for the Tams. That's the name received by the grandfather and father of the Tam lords, as they are known today. And the third were Ilox. Again, Tohill is the name of the god received by the grandfather and father of those lords, the same ones known today. And such was the naming of the three Quiches. They have never let go of one another, because the god has just one name, Tohill, for the Quiche proper, and Tohill for the Tams and Ilox. There is just one name for their god, and so the Quiche threesome has not come apart. Those three, Tohill, Alix, and Hakuits, are truly great in their very being. And then all the tribes came in, Rabinals, Kachchekals, those of Birdhouse, along with the Mexican people, as the names are today, and the languages of the tribes changed there. Their language became differentiated. They could no longer understand one another clearly when they came away from Tulan, and there they broke apart. There were those who went eastward, and many who came here. But they were all alike in dressing with hides. There were no clothes of the better kind. They were in patches. They were adorned with mere animal hides. They were poor. They had nothing of their own. But they were people of genius in their very being when they came away from Tulan Zua. 7 caves, 7 canyons, so says the ancient text. They walked in crowds when they arrived at Tulan, and there was no fire. Only those with Tohill had it. This was the tribe whose god was first to generate fire. How it was generated is not clear. Their fire was already burning when Jaguar Keats and Jaguar Knight first saw it. "Alas, fire has not yet become ours. We'll die from the cold," they said, and then Tohill spoke. "Do not grieve. You will have your own, even when the fire you're talking about has been lost," Tohill told them. "Aren't you a true god, our sustenance and our support, our god?" They said when they gave thanks for what Tohill had said. "Very well. In truth, I am your god, so be it. I am your lord, so be it." Now, interesting there, "so be it" is effectively what the terms amen means. It also is what fiat means, and there are a number of terms that effectively mean "so be it" that have been used for countless centuries. And I find it kind of interesting how a lot of these different things sort of come together, how things fit together that you'd think shouldn't, or you'd think wouldn't. They could bear the cold and hail no longer. By now they were chattering and shivering. There was no life left in them. Their legs and arms kept shaking. Their hands were stiff when they arrived. Truly, since you have your god, your nurturer, and he is the representation, the commemoration of your maker and modeler, don't give the tribes their fire until you give something to Tohill. You don't want them to give anything to you. You must ask for what belongs to Tohill. To him must come what they give in order to get fire, said the Zabalban. He had wings like the wings of a bat. "I am a messenger of those who made you and modeled you," said the Zabalban. So now they were happy. Now they thought all the more of Tohill, Alix, and Hakuits. When the Zabalban had spoke, he made himself vanish right in front of them without delay. More interesting stuff there, extremely interesting, because if I'm remembering correctly, I think it was Adonai. It was either Adonai or Elohim. Both are plural and different forms of Tetragrammaton that were the creators of mankind in the original Hebrew. It's a plural word, implying that it wasn't one being or one force that created mankind in its image. And that's why I find some of this to be quite interesting. In fact, some believe in the ancient traditions, and Cooper talks about there being sort of like 3 different main gods or forms of worship. And it's said by some that mankind's origins have been discovered by, for example, the military, the government, and their interactions and research into what I guess people would refer to as aliens. But what I think we're dealing with isn't as simple as extraterrestrial. It seems to be interdimensional in nature, and that's something that has been known since the 1950s. I think people should be asking why they haven't heard about it. They should probably begin asking why their own government spends so much money to keep this stuff from them. Billions every year wasted. Because I don't think this is ever going to go away. I don't think whatever this is and whatever it represents is ever going away. And the sooner we begin to try to understand what may have always been, what may always be, the better. Because as it stands now, it seems like we're chasing our tails in endless circles, pretending that we're making progress when we're really not. And I know I personally am getting kind of sick of it. I'd prefer almost any other path than the one we're on. So if there's any way I can change that, I will. Isn't it their heart's desire to embrace me, I who am Tohill? But if there is no desire, then I'll not give them their fire, says Tohill. When the time comes, not right now, they'll be suckled on their sides, under their arms, he says to you. You will say, they were told, Jaguar Keats, Jaguar Night, not right now, and Dark Jaguar. And then they spoke the word of Tohill. Very well, let him suckle, and very well, we shall embrace him, said the tribes. When they answered and agreed to the word of Tohill, they made no delay, but said very well, right away. And then they received their fire. After that they got warm, but there was one group that simply stole the fire there in the smoke. This was the Bat House. Snake-Tooth is the name of the god of the Kakachals, but it looks like a bat. They went right past in the smoke then. They sneaked past when they came to get fire. Those fiery Kakachals didn't ask for their fire. They didn't give themselves up in defeat. But all the other tribes were defeated when they gave themselves up to being suckled on their sides, under their arms. And this is what Tohill meant by suckled, that all the tribes be cut open before him, and that their hearts be removed, through their sides, under their arms. This deed had not been yet attempted when Tohill saw into the middle of it, nor had Jaguar Keats, Jaguar Night, not right now, and Dark Jaguar received fiery splendor and majesty. When they came away from Tulanzuya, they weren't eating. They observed a continuous fast. It was enough that they watch intently for the dawning, that they watch closely for the rising of the sun, taking turns at watching for the great star named Sun Carrier. This one came first before the sun when the sun was born, the newly risen Sun Carrier. And there always they were facing the east, when they were there in the place named Tulanzuya. Their gods came from there. It wasn't really here they received their fiery splendor and their dominion, but rather there the tribes great and small were subjugated and humiliated. When they were cut open before Tohill, all the peoples gave their blood, their gore, their sides, their underarms. Fiery splendor came to them all at once at Tulan, along with great knowledge, and they achieved this in the darkness in the night. And now they came away. They tore themselves away from there. Now they left the east. Our home is not here. Let's go until we see where we belong, said Tohill. He actually spoke to them, to Jaguar Keats, Jaguar Night, not right now, and Dark Jaguar. It remains for you to give thanks. Since you have yet to take care of bleeding your ears, yet to take stitches in your elbows, you must worship. This is your way of giving thanks before your God. Very well, they replied. Then they bled their ears. They cried in their song about coming from Tulan. They cried in their hearts when they came away, when they made their departure from Tulan. Alas, we won't be here when we see the dawn, when the sun is born, when the face of the earth is lit, they said. And then they came away, just camping on the road. People were just camping there. Each tribe slept and then got up again. And they were always watching for the stars, the sign of the day. They kept the sign of the dawn in their hearts when they came away from the east. In unity they passed beyond the place named Great Hollow today. And then they arrived on top of a mountain there. All the Kish people got together there, along with the other tribes, and all of them held council there. The name of the mountains has today is from when they took counsel there together. Place of Advice is the name of the mountain. They got together and identified themselves there. Here am I am a Kish person, and you there, you are Tams. This will be your name, the Tams were told. And then the Alaks were told, you are the Alaks, this will be your name. The three Kishes must not be lost. We are united in one word, which again is Tohil, their god that gave them fire. Now Tohil and this alliance is going to become a bit more interesting as it goes. And I don't think I'll really have to point out my own thoughts of it. I think it will be pretty apparent what I'm trying to get at and what I am trying to mean by continuing to go with this. And that became their citadel, since they were there when the sun, moon, and stars appeared, when it dawned and cleared on the faces of the earth, over everything under the sky. And there began their song named Kamaku. They sang out the lament of their very hearts and guts. In their song they stated, alas, we were lost at Tulan, we shattered ourselves, we left our elder brothers behind, our younger brothers. Where did they see the sun? Where must they be staying, now that the dawn has come? They were speaking of the penitents and sacrificers, who were the Mexican people. Even though Tohil is his name, he is the same as the god of the Mexican people, who is named Yolcuit in Quetzalcoatl. When we divided, there at Tulan, at Zuaya, they left with us, and they shared our identity when we came away. They said among themselves, when they remembered their faraway brothers, elder and younger, the Mexican people, whose dawn was there in the place named Mexico today. And again, some of the people stayed there in the east. Sovereign Olaman is their name. We left them behind, they said. It was a great weight on their hearts up there on Hakuits. The Tams and Alaks did likewise, except that they were in the forest. Tam tribes is the name of the place where it dawned for the penitents and sacrificers of the Tams with their god, the same Tohil. There was just one name for the god of all three divisions of the Kish people. Snaketooth is the name of the Bat House, and they speak a different language today. Along with their god, the lineage took their names. They are called Keeper of the Bat Mat and Keeper of the Dance Mat. Like their god, their language was differentiated on account of a stone. When they came from Tulan in the darkness, all the tribes were sown and came to light in unity, and each division was allocated a name for its god. Now, it was only a manifestation of his genius that spoke when the penitents and sacrificers came before Tohil, and what they brought and burned was not great. All they burned before their gods was resin, just bits of pitchy bark along with marigolds. And when Tohil spoke now, it was only his genius. When the gods taught procedures to the penitents and sacrificers, they said this when they spoke. This very place has become our mountain, our plain. Now that we are yours, our day and our birth have become great, because all the peoples are yours, all the tribes, and since we are still your companions, even in your citadel, we shall give you procedures. Do not reveal us to the tribes when they burn with envy over us. They are truly numerous now, so don't let us be hunted down, but rather give the creatures of the grasses and grains to us, such as the female deer and female birds. Please come give us a little of their blood. Take pity on us. and set the pelts of deer aside, save them. These are for disguises, for deception. They will become deerskin bundles, and they will also serve as our surrogates before the tribes. When you are asked, 'Where is Towhill?' then you will show them the deerskin bundle, yet you won't be giving yourselves away. And there is still more for you to do. You will become great in your very being, defeat all the tribes. They must bring blood and lymph before us. They must come to embrace us. They belong to us already," said Towhill, Alex, and Harakut. They had a useful appearance when they saw them, when they came to burn offerings before them. Again, three different figures that could represent three different forces. There's always been this view that it was three different things came together to create mankind, which is very interesting. It's almost everywhere. Yeah, it's interesting how the archetype is, isn't it? It's pretty it's not too hard to figure out, I don't think. Like a Promethean figure. They even have interestingly, in another Native American tale that I've read in another collection of mythology and tales, it was actually like these weird three beast things on a mountain that originally had fire, and I think it was like Coyote first stole it, and he passed it to Wolf, who passed it to Squirrel, who passed it to Frog, and who put it into wood. And that's how like the view of like fire being made from rubbing sticks together was mythologized. It's very interesting. No matter where you turn, you'll find some of this stuff, and that's what I found in this. I didn't expect to find half of what I found in this text. I've been wanting to read it for the last 2 years, and I finally got around to it, and it's some interesting stuff, I'll say. And when they got hold of the birds and fawns, they would then go to anoint the mouth of the stone of Towhill or Alux with the blood of the deer or bird, and the bloody drink was drunk by the gods. The stone would speak at once when the penitents and sacrificers arrived, when they went to make their burnt offerings. There was a deerskin bundle for each of their gods, which was displayed there on the mountain. It wasn't obvious how to get to their houses, nor was it obvious where their wives stayed. Again, sort of hinting at that we're dealing with something interdimensional. A lot of what they do is not obvious. It's extremely difficult to grasp. Even now, I would say. Back then, it was probably impossible. Now we're starting to develop some of the tools and reality maps I think we would truly need to understand an intelligence like what is being described by almost every people that has ever lived. It wasn't obvious where they were. Now they were crowding the roads. Already their roadways were obvious. In the minds of all the tribes, it was as if humans weren't involved. They did it just as a way of decoying the tribes. That was what their hearts desired. They did it so that the tribes wouldn't get really frightened just yet. That was what they intended when they cried out with the cry of the puma and the cry of the jaguar. And then, when they saw just one or two people out walking, they intended to overwhelm them. We only take stitches in our ears and our elbows when we ask for our strength and our manhood from Towhill, Alex, and Hakuitz. Who will take care of the death of the tribes? Should we just kill them one by one? They said amongst themselves. And when they went before Towhill, Alex, and Hakuitz, they took stitches in their ears and their elbows in front of the gods. They spilled their blood. They poured gourd fills into the mouths of the stones. But these weren't really stones. Each one became like a boy when they arrived, happy once again over the blood. And then came a further sign as to what the penitents and sacrificers should do. You must win a great many victories. Your right to do this came from over there at Tulan when you brought us here, they were told. Then the matter of the suckling was set forth at the place called Stagger, and the blood that would result from it, the rainstorm of blood, also became a gift for Towhill, along with Alex and Hakuitz. Again, gods that receive human blood in sacrifice, that demand it. Now here begins the abduction of the people of the tribes. by Jaguar Keats, Jaguar Knight, Not Right Now, and Dark Jaguar. And then comes the killing of the tribes. This is how they died. When there was just one person out walking, or just two were out walking, it wasn't obvious when they took them away. After that, they went to cut them open before Tohill and Alix. After that, when they had offered the blood, the skull would be placed in the road. They would roll it onto the road, so the tribes were talking. A jaguar has been eating was all that was said, because their tracks were like a jaguar's tracks when they did their deed. They did not reveal themselves. Many people were abducted. It was as if the tracks were there for the sole purpose of leading them astray. They did their killing on the frontiers of the tribes when the abductions began. They singled them out and cut them down. Tohill, Alix, and Hekuitz had the appearance of three boys when they went out walking. These were simply the spirit familiars of the stones. They would vanish the moment they would be seen by the tribes. What would assure the defeat of the Cowics, the Quiche people? Our vassals have met their ends because of them. Isn't it clear that our people have been lost because of them? What if they finish us off with these abductions? Let it be this way. If the fiery splendor of Tohill, Alix, and Hekuitz is so great, then let this Tohill become our god. Let him be captured. Don't let them defeat us completely. Don't we constitute a multitude of people? And as for the Cowics, there aren't as many of them, they said when all of them had assembled. Some among the tribe also said this when they spoke. Who could be bathing every day at the river bank? If it's Tohill, Alix, and Hekuitz, then we can defeat them ahead of time. Let the defeat of the penitents and sacrificers begin right now, some of them said, and then they spoke further. How shall we defeat them? And then they said, let this be our means of defeating them. Since they present the appearance of adolescent boys at the river, let two maidens go there. Let them be choice maidens who radiate preciousness, so that when they go, they'll be desirable. And this is the last place I have marked for this one. What if we die, and what if we're defeated? They spoke straight from their hearts before Tohill. Do not grieve. I am here, and here is what you will use on them. Do not be afraid. Jaguar Keats, Jaguar Knight, Not Right Now, and Dark Jaguar were told, and then the matter of the yellow jackets and wasps was set out. And when they had gone to get these insects and come back with them, they put them inside 4 large gourds, which were placed all around the citadel. The yellow jackets and wasps were shut inside the gourds. These were their weapons against the tribes, and they were spied upon and watched from hiding. Their citadel was studied by the messengers of the tribes. There aren't many of them, they said, but when they came to look, it was only the mannequins, the wood carvings, that were moving with weapons and shields in their hands. They looked like real people. They looked like real killers when the tribes saw them. And all the tribes were happy when they saw there weren't many of them. The tribes themselves were in crowds. There were countless people, warriors and killers, the assassins of Jaguar Keats, Jaguar Knight, and Not Right Now, who were there on the mountain called Hekuitz. This is where they went when they were invaded. Here we shall tell about it. And these are the ones who were there, Jaguar Keats, Jaguar Knight, Not Right Now, and Dark Jaguar. They were in unity on the mountain with their wives and children. And then all the warriors came, the killers, and it was nothing less than 800 score, or even 30 times 800 people who surrounded the citadel. They were bellowing, bristling with weapons and shields, rending their mouths with howling and growling, bellowing and yelling, whistling through their hands when they came up below the citadel. But the penitents and sacrificers had no fear. They just enjoyed the spectacle from the parapet of their stockade. They were lined up with their wives and children. Their hearts were content, since the tribes were merely making talk. And then they climbed up the mountainside, and now they were just a little short of the edge of the citadel. And then the gourds were opened up. There were 4 of them around the citadel, and the yellow jackets and wasps were like a cloud of smoke when they poured out of each of the gourds. And the warriors were done in, with the insects landing on their eyes and landing on their noses, on their mouths, their legs, their arms. The insects went after them wherever they were. They overtook them wherever they were. There were yellow jackets and wasps everywhere, landing to sting their eyes. They had to watch out for the whole swarms of them. There were insects going after every single person. They were dazed by the yellow jackets and wasps. No longer able to hold on to their weapons and shields, they were doubling over and falling to the ground, stumbling. They fell down the mountainside. The first to be overtaken were finished off, killed, and it wasn't just a few people who died. Then all the tribes were conquered. Now the tribes humbled themselves before Jaguar Keats, Jaguar Knight, and Not Right Now. Take pity on us, don't kill us, they said. Very well. Although you were destined to join the dead, you will be payers of tribute for as long as there are days and as long as there is light, they were told. What's interesting is one last thing. Since they knew about their death and disappearances, they left instructions with their sons. It's some pretty interesting stuff. I can't even really think of a good way of putting it besides the mythology of aliens as it exists today. That seems to be the closest mythological thing or archetypal thing I can think of for what is meant by the Zabalbans that seem to enjoy fucking with humans and torturing them. Zabalba basically just translates literally to place of fear. And what's interesting is it doesn't sound all that far out from, alien abduction syndrome as it classically happens when people are abducted and put through tests that they don't really understand that appear to be more than what's actually going on. The tests appear to be scientific in nature, at least that's the image presented by a number of people and that I think is trying to be projected on this. But it seems to not really be dealing with that when you're talking about classical abductions. And it's interesting, I've looked into it quite a bit. I've tried to, at least, and I've tried to come to understand what I can about it. And it seems as though, at least to me, at least right now, that what's being done is not about scientific tests, at least not as we know or understand science today. It seems to be more about, I guess, eliciting a sort of response from people. It's always been said that there are things that sort of feed on human darkness, on terror, and it seems more like something like that is what's going on than anything else. Although it's been said that there have been hybrids by a number of people, some people would even say that the hybrids are already here, that they're already among us, and we don't know. They're already on planet and have been since like the 90s. And what's kind of scary about it is it's said that the hybridization program kept going and mixing until they created something with some of the psychic powers of a traditional gray alien, which is something like a biological android, as best I understand it, and a mix between that and a human being, as something like a stand-in, as something like these weird off-world, perhaps off-dimension intelligences that it seems we've been dealing with for a long time. In the mythologies, it actually gets worse the more you look into native stuff. Like, the Popol Vuh may sound bad, but I'm gonna turn to some of the quotes that I was gonna get into in something else, and I have covered it in something else before, so it may be familiar, but I think it bears repeating, if this is what I wanted. You have arrived by your effort alone to what the shamans of ancient Mexico called the topic of topics. I have been beating around the bush all this time, insinuating to you that something is holding us prisoner. Indeed, we are held prisoner. This was an energetic fact for the sorcerers of ancient Mexico. This is the appropriate time of day for doing what I am asking you to do. It takes a moment to engage the necessary attention to do it. Don't stop until you catch that fleeting black shadow. I did see some strange fleeting black shadow projected on the foliage of the trees. It was either a shadow going back and forth or various fleeting shadows moving side to side or straight up in the air. They looked like a fat black fish to me, enormous fish. It was as if gigantic swordfish were flying in the air. I was engrossed in the sight. Then finally, it scared me. It became too dark to see the foliage, yet I could still see the fleeting black shadows. "What is it, Don Juan?" I asked. "Long ago, the native sorcerers/shamans of Mexico discovered that we have a companion for life," he said, as clearly as he could. "We have a predator that came from the depths of the cosmos, and it took over the rule of our lives. Human beings are its prisoners. The predator is our lord and master. It has rendered us docile, helpless. If we want to protest, it suppresses our protest. If we want to act independently, it demands that we don't do so." It was very dark around us, and that seemed to curtail any expression on my part. If it had been daylight, I would have laughed my head off. In the dark, I felt quite inhibited. "It's pitch black around us," Don Juan said, "but if you look out of the corner of your eye, you will still see fleeting shadows jumping all around you." He was right. I could still see them. Their movements made me dizzy. Don Juan turned on the light, and that seemed to dissipate everything. Don Juan said, "Why has this predator taken over in the fashion that you're describing, Don Juan?" I asked. "There must be a logical explanation." "There is an explanation," Don Juan replied, "which is the simplest explanation in the world. They took over because we are food for them, and they squeeze us mercilessly because we are their sustenance. Just as we rear chickens in chicken coops, gallineros, the predators rear us in human coops, humaneros. Therefore, their food is always available to them." I felt that my head was shaking violently from side to side. I could not express my profound sense of unease and discontentment, but my body moved to bring it to the surface. I shook from head to toe without any volition on my part. I heard myself saying, "No, no, no, no! This is absurd, Don Juan. What you're saying is something monstrous. It simply can't be true, for sorcerers or for average men or for everyone." "Why not?" Don Juan asked calmly. "Because it infuriates you?" "Yes, it infuriates me," I retorted. "Those claims are monstrous." "Well," he said, "you haven't heard all the claims yet. Wait a bit longer and see how you feel. I'm going to subject you to a blitz. That is, I'm going to subject your mind to tremendous onslaughts, and you cannot get up and leave because you're caught, not because I'm holding you prisoner, because something in you will prevent you from leaving while another part of you is going to go truthfully berserk. So brace yourself." There was something in me which I felt was a glutton for punishment. He was right. I wouldn't have left the house for the world, and yet I didn't like one bit the inanities he was spouting. Don Juan said, "I want to appeal to your analytical mind. Think for a moment and tell me how you would explain the contradiction between the intelligence of man the engineer and the stupidity of his systems of belief, or the stupidity of his contradictory behavior." Sorcerers believe that the predators have given us our systems of belief, our ideas of good and evil, our social mores. The predators are the predators who make us complacent, who are ones who set up our hopes and expectations and dreams of success or failure. They have given us covetousness, greed, and cowardice. It is the predators who make us complacent, routinary, and egomaniacal. "But how can they do this, Don Juan?" I asked, somehow angered further by what he was saying. "Do they whisper all that in our ears while we are asleep?" "No, they don't do it that way. That's idiotic," Don Juan said, smiling. "They are infinitely more efficient and organized than that. In order to keep us obedient, meek, and weak, the predators engage themselves in a stupendous maneuver. Stupendous, of course, from the point of view of a fighting strategist, a horrendous maneuver from the point of view of those who suffer it. They gave us their mind. Do you hear me? The predators give us their mind, which becomes our mind. The predator's mind is baroque, contradictory, morose, and filled with the fear of being discovered any minute now. I know that even though you have never suffered hunger," he went on, "you have food anxiety, which is none other than the anxiety of the predator, who fears that any moment now its maneuver is going to be uncovered, and its food is going to be denied. Through the mind, which after all is their mind, the predators inject into the lives of human beings whatever is convenient for them. The predators ensure in this manner a degree of security, to act as a buffer against their fear. It's not that I can't accept all this at face value, Don Juan," I said. "I could, but there's something so odious about it that it actually repels me. It forces me to take a contradictory stand. If it's true that they eat us, how did they do it?" Don Juan had a broad smile on his face. He was as pleased as Punch. He explained that sorcerers see infant human beings as strange, luminous balls of energy, covered from the top to the bottom with a glowing coat, something like a plastic cover that is adjusted tightly over their cocoon of energy. He said that glowing coat of awareness was what the predators consumed, and that when a human being reached adulthood, all that was left of that glowing coat of awareness was a narrow fringe that went from the ground to the top of the toes. That fringe permitted mankind to continue living, but only barely. As if I were in a dream, I heard Don Juan explaining that, to his knowledge, man was the only species that had the glowing coat of awareness outside that luminous cocoon. Therefore, he became easy prey for an awareness of a different order, such as the heavy awareness of the predator. He then made the most damaging statement he had made so far. He said that this narrow fringe of awareness was the epicenter of self-reflection, where man was irredeemably caught. By playing on our self-reflection, which is the only point of awareness left to us, the predator creates flares of awareness that they proceed to consume in a ruthless, predatory fashion. They give us inane problems that force those flares of awareness to rise, and in this manner they keep us alive in order for them to be fed with the energetic flare of our pseudo-concerns. There must have been something in what Don Juan was saying which was so devastating to me that at the point I actually got sick to my stomach. After a moment's pause, long enough for me to recover, I asked Don Juan, "But why is it that the sorcerers of ancient Mexico, and all sorcerers today, although they see the predators, don't do anything about it?" "There's nothing that you and I can do about it," Don Juan said in a grave, sad voice. "All we can do is discipline ourselves to the point where they will not touch us." How can you ask your fellow man to go through those rigors of discipline? They'll laugh and make fun of you, and the more aggressive ones will beat the shit out of you, and not so much because they don't believe it. Down in the depths of every human being, there is an ancestral, visceral knowledge about the predator's existence. My analytical mind swung back and forth like a yo-yo. It left and came back, and left me and came back again. Whatever Don Juan was proposing was preposterous, incredible. At the same time, it was a most reasonable thing, so simple, it explained every kind of human contradiction I could think of. But how could one have taken all this seriously? Don Juan was pushing me into the path of an avalanche that would take me down forever. I felt another wave of a threatening sensation. The wave didn't stem from me, yet it was attached to me. Don Juan was doing something to me, mysteriously positive and terribly negative at the same time. I sensed it as an attempt to cut a thin film that seemed to be glued to me. His eyes were fixed on mine in an unblinking stare. He moved his eyes away and began to talk without looking at me any more. "Whenever doubt plagued you to a dangerous point," he said, "do something pragmatic about it. Turn off the light, pierce the darkness, find out what you can see." He got up and turned off the lights. I stopped him. "No, no, Don Juan," I said. "Don't turn off the lights. I'm doing okay." What I felt then was a most unusual, for me, fear of the darkness. The mere thought of it made me pant. I definitely knew something viscerally, but I wouldn't dare touch it, or bring it to the surface. Not in a million years. "You saw the fleeting shadows against the trees," Don Juan said, sitting back against his chair. "That's pretty good. I'd like you to see them inside this room. You're not seeing anything. You're just merely catching fleeting images. You have enough energy for that. I feared that Don Juan would get up anyway and turn off the lights, which he did. 2 seconds later I was screaming my head off. Not only did I catch a glimpse of those fleeting images, I heard them buzzing by my ears. Don Juan doubled up with laughter as he turned on the lights. "What a temperamental fellow," he said. "A total disbeliever on the one hand and a total pragmatist on the other. You must arrange this internal fight, otherwise you're going to swell up like a big toad and burst." Don Juan kept on pushing his barb deeper and deeper into me. "The sorcerers of ancient Mexico," he said, "saw the predator. They called it the flyer because it leaps through the air. It is not a pretty sight. It is a big shadow, impenetrably dark, a black shadow that jumps through the air. Then it lands flat on the ground. The sorcerers of ancient Mexico were quite ill at ease with the idea of when it first made its appearance on Earth. They reasoned that man must have been a complete being at one point, with stupendous insights and feats of awareness that are mythological legends nowadays, and then everything seems to disappear, and now we have a sedated man." I wanted to get angry and call him a paranoiac, but somehow the righteousness that was usually just underneath the surface of my being wasn't there. Something in me was beyond the point of asking myself my favorite question: what if all he said is true? At the moment he was talking to me, that night, in my heart of hearts, I felt that all of what he was saying was true, but at the same time, and with equal force, I felt that all of what he was saying was absurdity itself. "What are you saying, Don Juan?" I asked feebly. My throat was constricted, I could hardly breathe. "What I'm saying is that what we have been against us is not a simple predator. It is very smart and organized. It follows a methodical system to render us useless. Man, the magical being that he is destined to be, is no longer magical. He is an average piece of meat. There are no more dreams for man, but the dreams of an animal who is being raised to become a piece of meat, trite, conventional, imbecilic." Don Juan's words were eliciting a strange bodily reaction in me comparable to the sensation of nausea. It was as if I were going to get sick to my stomach again, but the nausea was coming from the bottom of my being, from the marrow of my bones. I convulsed involuntarily. Don Juan shook me by the shoulders forcefully. I felt my neck wobbling back and forth under the impact of his grip. The maneuver calmed me down at once. I felt more in control. "This predator," Don Juan said, "which, of course, is an inorganic being, is not altogether invisible to us as other inorganic beings are. I think as children we do see it, but we decide it's so horrific that we don't want to think about it. Children, of course, could insist on focusing on the sight, but everybody else around them dissuades them from doing so. The only alternative left for mankind is discipline. Discipline is the only deterrent, but by discipline I don't mean harsh routines. I don't mean waking up every morning at 5:30 and throwing cold water on yourself until you're blue. Sorcerers understand discipline as the capacity to face with serenity odds that are not included in our expectations. For sorcerers, discipline is an art, the art of facing infinity without flinching, not because they are strong and tough, but because they are filled with awe." "In what way would the sorcerer's discipline be a deterrent to the flyers?" I asked. Don Juan scrutinized my face, as if to discover any signs of disbelief. He said, "Sorcerers say that discipline makes the glowing code of awareness unpalatable to the flyer. The result is that the predators become bewildered. An inedible glowing code of awareness is not part of their cognition, I suppose. After being bewildered, they don't have any recourse other than refraining from continuing their nefarious task. If the predators don't eat our glowing code of awareness for a while, it will keep on growing. Simplifying this matter to the extreme, I can say that sorcerers, by means of their discipline, push the predators away long enough to allow their glowing code of awareness to grow beyond the level of the toes. Once it goes beyond the level of the toes, it grows back to its natural size. The sorcerers of ancient Mexico used to say that the glowing code of awareness is like a tree. If it is not pruned, it grows to its natural size and volume. As awareness reaches levels higher than the toes, tremendous maneuvers of perception become a matter of course. The grand trick of those sorcerers of ancient time was to burden the flyer's mind with discipline. Sorcerers found out that if they taxed the flyer's mind with inner silence, the foreign installation would flee, and give any one of the practitioners involved in this maneuver the total certainty of the mind's foreign origin. The alien mind control of these creatures comes back, I assure you, but not as strong, and a process begins which is the fleeing of the flyer's mind, becomes routine, until one day it flees permanently. That's the day when you have to rely on your own devices, which are nearly zero. A sad day indeed. There's no one to tell you what to do. There's no mind of foreign origin to dictate the imbecilities you're accustomed to. My teacher, the Nagwald Julian, used to warn all his disciples that this was the toughest day in a sorcerer's life, for the real mind that belongs to us, the sum total of our experience after a lifetime of domination, has been rendered shy, insecure, and shifty. Personally, I would say that the real battle of the sorcerer begins at that moment. The rest is merely preparation. I think that's about the extent of it. It doesn't get in that much deeper, although it continues. That's from The Active Side of Infinity by Carlos Castaneda. It's some pretty interesting stuff. At the end of the day, it's kind of frightening to think of beings that are not only inorganic, but within our own consciousness, or an extension of it to some degree. I don't know that I could confirm it in one way or another. I don't know that it can ever be confirmed. What I do know is that there is too much strangeness for everything to be explained away simply. I've seen enough myself, and I've seen evidence from others that suggests to me that there is a lot more going on than perhaps many of us are willing or able to deal with. We are rapidly approaching a point of no return, I think. A point when it may not matter what we want. It may become too late. There are people that are open to the experiences of what they call the visitors, and that's a word you'll hear a lot of people say. There are some people like Whitley Strieber that will tell you that all it takes is a flashlight and the capacity to meditate to make contact. I won't get into my own personal experiences because I don't know that it would help, but he's not wrong. It's a lot easier to make contact than anybody thinks. There's a conversation going on right now that's essentially one-sided, for us at least, and we have a lot of people that stand to gain a lot and to subjugate perhaps the rest of us forever in this if we don't respond. We're not representing ourselves. And if all we have to represent us are people that lie to us and tell us what they think is right for us, I don't think we're ever going to reach a day where mankind is truly free. I think we're sitting and staring at perhaps one of the most important times in history right now. It's extremely difficult to put into words the significance of all of this. It seems as though, and at least this is what the US military thinks and has thought for quite some time, that there is a sort of process unfolding, that something is slowly being revealed to us, that the sightings of UFOs with all sorts of pretty lights, doing all sorts of maneuvers, is meant to get us to look, to start paying attention to things that we aren't. It's a way of trying to start a conversation. You can see numerous means and methods of this, and I think unless we are willing and able to take it into our own hands, the only hands that it will be left in, and those are those that don't even consider us human, those that would lead us to the slaughter like Judas goats. And that's not something I think I can endure. That's not something I think I would be able to. I don't like to play shepherd, but it's become apparent to me that the sheeple are just They need someone that's going to give them the thought that they need to think for themselves and how to do it. Because you're taught what to think, not how to think these days. Now, a lot of our problems, I think, could be pretty simply solved. I think we're sitting on the verge of several possibilities. The technology for a literal utopian worldwide, sort of civilization, it's existed for a while. It's been in our hands. But there's certain sort of interests that are just never, ever, ever going to actually let us have them. They're never going to even admit that they exist, that they have access to them, any of this, unless we are able to, I guess, understand how we have been fooled, how we have fooled ourselves, how we help fool each other. We build these sort of fantasies, brick by brick, from the moment we're born to the moment we die. And I think it's about time we start tearing them down, because they're all built out of bullshit. I can't tell you how I know what I know. Some of it, you wouldn't believe me anyways. Nobody would. I don't even fucking believe it, and I experienced it. But I do know. What's standing in our way is not technology. What's standing in our way is ourselves. We are what's holding us back. And I don't know that if it's... Some people think that if we... There's sort of a doorway being opened right now. And if we don't all walk through it together, we may not get to go through it all. And suddenly, why all of these sort of hatreds are built up online, and all of this shit is pushed, may make a bit more sense. If that is actually the situation which we are in, and it does seem extremely likely to me, based on what I've experienced and what I've researched, we are on the cusp of utopia or destruction. The spirit of man is a fragile thing. It's pretty fragile, I think. And it seems as though if it's not nurtured in these dark times, it may be shattered forever. We may see a time when the concept of mysticism is just not even a concept. It's considered pure insanity. And that's sort of the world we live in today. There was a point when damnation was the worst thing you could ever really suffer or be, sort of condemned with. But these days, it's insanity. We live in a world where psychology really, sort of controls everything. And people are too afraid to talk about the things they've seen and experienced because they're afraid to be called crazy. I've talked about a couple of things, and there's a lot I'll probably never talk about. Some of it's just too weird, at least publicly. There's a lot I wish I could be saying, there's a lot I wish I could be doing right now, but I'm sort of stuck. There's only as much, I can only really go as far as certain things allow me to. But until we recognize that, realistically, the only person, the only force in our way is ourselves, I think we're going to be stuck forever. We're going to be fighting over things that don't matter, just so that we're distracted from trying to think about what I think really does. In some ways, it's been an extremely, extremely hard 5 years. Harder than any other period in my life. But in that time, I've learned more than I think I ever would have any other way. It's extremely strange. It's all so extremely strange. But really, like I said, there's a conversation going on, and we're not saying anything back, at least most of us. It's scary. It's not exactly easy to go out at night and try to make contact with something that exists with a sort of awareness that is beyond your comprehension, beyond your capacity to even fathom or think about or consider. And to actually make contact, it's even scarier. When you're face to face with something that just by looking at you can know everything you've ever experienced and what you're thinking at that exact moment, and manipulate your consciousness in ways you don't believe are even possible, it's fucking hard to deal with. We're dealing with stuff that perhaps humans have always been dealing with. This may be something that extends back countless years, back to mankind's, creation. It could easily explain the whole problem of the missing link in evolution as well. It may just be that there is nothing between, certain hominids and us, because there were genetic manipulations that led directly to us. Or what was between us has been completely destroyed. I truly don't know. It's hard to say, but it makes more sense than many other theories I've heard, especially given the kind of evidence I've seen. But I guess I'll start ending this up here. I think that I've gone over enough. I've probably taken this, to insane lengths that people will either laugh at or mock, but that's okay. That's a part of dealing with it. That's a part of, I guess, learning to accept what's right before us, what may be and may have been our destiny from the very beginning. I think that if we are not the ones to embrace this phenomenon, this experience, then all we can go off of are those that are, and those that can speak of it. And I can speak of it more than some, but there are many who know it quite better than I perhaps ever will. So I guess I'll just leave you with a quote. The universe is not only stranger than we know, it is stranger than we can know.